You're listening to PetLifeRadio.com.
Welcome to Animal Rights on Pet Life Radio. This is your host, Tim Link, and I'm so glad you're joining us today. We have the honor, very excited about this, honor of the #1 New York Times best-selling author in his latest book, The Seventh Plague, James Rollins. James is going to come on the show and chat with us about The Seventh Plague, a Sigma Force novel, of course. So I want to know all ins and outs of the book and what's going on with that and what the new twists are, plot twists and everything. We won't give all the good details, but we'll just put a little teaser out there. Then, of course, we'll talk to him about his writing and writing styles as well, because I know he's definitely got some structure in his life. I'm assuming he's not like the rest of us who just put together something in the last minute. So we will find out for sure. So everybody just hang tight, and we'll come back with James Rollins just after this commercial break. You're listening to Animal Rights on Pet Life Radio.
Sit. Stay. We'll be right back after a short pause. Well, 4 to be exact.
It's DesignerPetSweaters.com. Hand-knitted designer sweaters for your precious pup or cool cat. Beautiful couture patterns for your pets, including custom-knitted formal wear, casual wear, yachting, and even sports-themed. Many designer pet sweaters include feathered tammy hats, top hats, and a lot of sparkle. Each sweater includes leg loops, front paw sleeves, and leash opening. Visit DesignerPetSweaters.com to order your 4-legged fashions today. Your pets will stay warm for the winter and be runway ready. Large or small, we fit them all. DesignerPetSweaters.com.
Let's talk pets on PetLifeRadio.com.
Welcome back. Welcome back to Animal Rights on Pet Life Radio. And joining me now is #1 New York Times bestselling author James Rollins. James, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
It's good to have you here. You've been on the show before, but it's been a little while, so it's great to catch up a little bit. And I definitely want to pick your brain about the latest book, The Seventh Plague. Tell us a little bit about it.
Well, the story starts with an archaeologist that comes stumbling out of the Egyptian desert. He had vanished about 2 years prior. No one knew what his fate was. Unfortunately, even when he reappears, he isn't able to tell a story because he dies before he can reveal where he's been. But his body offers some tantalizing clues to his fate. Number one, it appears he was partially mummified. Basically, it looks like somebody had forced him to undergo this gruesome process prior to while he was still alive. And then also, he seems to be harboring this a plague organism, an organism that begins to spread through Cairo and beyond. And my cast of characters, Sigma Force, is called in to try to figure out where this archaeologist had been, where this organism originated from, and is there a way to stop this plague that's beginning to spread before it cascades into a series of plagues that are very similar to the plagues that were documented in the Book of Exodus with Moses.
I have to admit, when I first looked at, got my copy of the book, so I'm ready to sit down and read it, and I'm thinking to myself, well, I don't want to disbroadcast, but it is the holidays, and here we are talking about the seventh plague, plagues during the holidays, and I'm like, what is going on here? Why is the timing of this book? Then I realized, we got the Moses, we got the biblical theme, everything going on there. So actually, hand it to the editors and publishers. They know what they're doing sometimes.
They're clever that way. But also, I tied I always think thrillers work best if they can be a mirror of our times, a little reflection of what's going on there. And so the seed for this book became, because I have a background in veterinary medicine, so I'm always sort of curious about sort of these strange organisms, strange pathogens that are afflicting us here. And everybody's aware of the Zika virus that is now spreading around the globe. It started in a monkey in Uganda, in Africa. And, since then, it's spread pretty much around the globe to the point where there's cases being reported in Florida. Just last week, there's a case reported in Texas. Here we have this virus that no one's really been aware of before. It's causing these strange, crippling birth defects. And of course, me being a thriller writer, I want to explore that a little bit. So I twisted that virus. I've created a virus sort of similar to that, but that happens to just affect male children, very similar to Moses' 10th plague, which was the death of the firstborn sons. So the book serves sort of as a cautionary tale about epidemics, about how nature pushes back if confronted, and the fact that we are uniquely unprepared to face a lot of these organisms, because nature is very creative. It produces things that we don't expect, and oftentimes we're literally with our pants down, so to speak, when it comes to dealing with these organisms.
Yeah, and I find that fascinating. I mean, because obviously I'm not a veterinarian. I'm not in the medical profession whatsoever. I will put a little hyphen there, or a note there that I'm not a professional in that area. And I know there's a lot of different epidemics, plagues, things that have happened over the many millennials of this world. But wouldn't you think by now we would have at least a knowledge of what the potential could be and start prepping ahead of time? Or do you find it more of reactionary when it happens? Then we find ourselves sort of literally with our pants down trying to figure it all out again.
Well, I definitely think we all have a tendency just to react. I mean, look when it comes to the flu vaccine. We have to keep re-engineering that flu vaccine every year because we don't know how that virus is going to mutate. So we're sort of guessing what is going to change. We're putting these cocktails together because we just don't know what to expect. And we think we have a lot of confidence in Western medicine when it comes to things like this, but oftentimes it's false confidence. Another organism that appears in my novel are these electrical bacteria. These are bacteria, and this is true. These aren't creatures of my imagination. These scientists discovered this purely by accident. They were just fooling around with electrodes in mud and shocking the mud, and lo and behold, these colonies of bacteria rose to feed on the energy that was being produced, or electricity that was being produced by these electrodes. And what they discovered is about 12 different species of bacteria that their pure energy source is electricity. They consume raw electrons out of the environment, and that is their energy source. No one even guessed there were such creatures like that existed before. So, nature surprises us, and we're not going to be prepared. Like in my book, I'm then wonder, one of these organisms was infectious with a pathogen. What might that disease look like in us? And so, nature's always going to surprise us. I don't think we can anticipate what's going to happen out there.
That's a good point.
It's not everything.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, then tell us a little bit then about the seventh plague as far as what are some of the, without giving the whole thing away, what are some of the additional plot twists, or how does the Sigma Force team handle things differently, or are there any new players that come about here that we need to know about?
Well, there's the usual cast of characters that are here, but of course, as typical with my novel, they have to recruit new people to handle the new threats. And so there's the archaeologist's daughter, the last sort of surviving heir of this family, is still around, and so they seek her out to try to find some clue to where her father been. They try to find from this old paperwork, is there any clue about what had happened? But also introduce an entirely different storyline that deals with. I'm not going to say how it connects. You're going to have to read the book to find out how the connection goes. But I deal with this whole story about about climate change in the book also. And specifically the fact that it's not a diatribe against climate change or for climate change. Basically, it's just saying something's happening out there. November was the hottest November on record. The ice caps are melting. There's cruise ships right now that are beginning to book seats or cabins for trips along the Northwest Passage across the top of Canada, a route that used to be too frozen to even consider, too dangerous. Explorers died trying to make that trek. Yet now, there'll be Norwegian cruise line going along the Northwest Passage. So the world's changing, and how we deal with it is what I somewhat address in this book. And a new character is introduced, a sort of a tech billionaire who is in the vein of Richard Branson or Elon Musk. He's basically trying to see if there's a way he can engineer a way out of this crisis that's coming. And unfortunately, when it comes to dealing with so many variables in the climate, especially when the global engineering process that he's envisioning, there's too many variables to take into account. Things begin to go awry, and that it becomes another element to the story. How that connects to biblical plague, I'm not going to tell you.
That's right. You got to pick up a copy. Everybody pick up a copy and find out for yourselves. So then let me ask you this. You mentioned that you're fascinated with the scientific aspects of it, your veterinary medicine background, all the craziness going on in the world. And, of course, I'm assuming you're writing the next book now or have it already prepped and ready to go. How do you intertwine all that? Because the latest madness of the world, we'll just put it that way, changes so frequently. How do you determine ahead of time, okay, this is what we're going to put in there and how we're going to write it out?
Well, I've always got my antenna up for that next idea, either that historical mystery, that piece of history that maybe ends in a question mark, or that science that could go what if and where that's going to be headed, and try to find some way of, connecting the past to the present through a roller coaster ride. And so I also like the fact that, when it comes to this is the 12th book in the series, and I think only a very small fraction of my readership has actually read my books in order. I sort of tailor my series so you can jump in at any point and pretty much don't feel lost at the same time. If you do read them in order or some semblance of order, you'll get some nuance of character that progresses. So at the end of this book, I always sort of have a tendency to leave something a little bit hanging. The story's resolved, but there's some thread that's left, that's still frayed there. And so there's a big shock to the ending of this book. And the repercussions of that ending and that choice that a character makes in this book is pivotal to this next book I'm writing.
Very good. Very good. Because I like the way you put that, and I like how you put your books together, because you're right. I mean, if you've been a fan for a long time, you start from the beginning, you definitely follow along and get to know the characters and get to know the storyline, but they are standalone. So if I'm new to James Rollins' books, in the Sigma Force series, which I'd had to be hiding under a rock if I was, but in any case, if I'm new to this, I could jump in with the Seventh Plague, read that, and still not really miss out or be confused about if I step back to some of your other books.
Exactly. I just got a review that stated this as specific. It was a new reviewer. He never read any of my books before. He was reading the Seventh Plague for the first time, and he was a little leery about whether or not he was going to be able to sort of follow along with a series that's been 12 books in length at that point. And he was saying, if you told me this was the first book in the series, I would not be surprised this was the first book in the series, because it hopefully feels self-contained.
And I think it's fascinating. Let me ask you on that trait from an author standpoint. Obviously, you're wanting to put together a series that your fans can follow along and still feel that the next one's even better than the one before, but you're trying to attract new ones. How do you keep that balance together? And then how do you feel as an author after doing this for so long of getting that type of review? It's like, someone brand new coming in, getting to know what I do.
Well, what my goal is when I start a book is, I need to establish a connection between the reader and those characters. Because I might build the best roller coaster ride of all time in a book that's plot that's twisty and turning with great drops and great, sudden accelerations. But if you're not invested in that character, it's going to feel leaden. If I dangle a character over a cliff and you're not attached to that character, you might be like, I'm sort of concerned whether he falls or not. But if I've done my job properly and I've emotionally tied you to that character, then you're going to care whether they drop or not. So even every time I start a novel, I'm very conscious that I've got to attach that new reader to the set of characters. So, I try to find different ways to really quickly establish that relationship between the reader and the new reader and that character that's been around for a while. So once that's established, then the roller coaster ride is going to work for them too. Whereas if somebody has read my books in order, I mentioned before that nuance of character, whatever I'm going to be bringing to the table now to introduce that new reader is going to actually even compound that for the old reader. So whatever I'm adding to maybe hook that new reader to that character is actually going to hopefully, reestablish that relationship or reinforce that relationship with that old reader. So it actually builds, has a bigger effect for that older reader.
Very good. Nicely done. Yeah. Perfect sense. Almost like you thought it out once before, right?
Or 33 times.
There you go. All right, we're going to take a quick commercial break. Then we'll come back with James Rollins, talk to him a little bit more about the latest book, The Seventh Plague, a Sigma Force novel, and also talk to him about his writing styles and what he hoped to accomplish with this book. So everybody just hang tight. You're listening to Animal Rights on Pet Life Radio.
Sit. Stay. We'll be right back after a short pause. Well, 4 to be exact.
Don't do what I did and run out.
If it's working, don't quit. Why would you stop?
Why undo all the good that's been accomplished?
You've got to feed them right for life.
Dynovite is nutrition.
If I ever took Roy off of Dynovite...
No.
When I get to about 3/4...
When I get down to the bottom of my box of Dynovite...
Oh, no. I've got a couple more scoops.
It's time to place my order. Dynovite.com.
DINOVITE.com.
859-428-1000.
Order a 90-day supply of Dynovite for your dog this week.
We'll send you a bottle of LicoChaps free.
New improved LicoChaps with omega-6, omega-3, vitamin E,
and now 6 extra direct-fed microbials.
Even better for the digestive tract and immune system.
Try LicoChaps.
Free this week at Dynovite.com.
Just feed your dog right. Use Dynovite.
Dynovite for life.
859-428-1000.
859-428-1000.
DINOVITE.com.
Hi, this is Tim Link, animal communicator and pet expert and host of Animal Rights on Pet Life Radio. Have you ever wanted to know what your pet is really thinking? Do you want to find out if they truly understand what you're trying to tell them? Ever wish you could build a better understanding and closer relationship with your pet? Well, now you can. Learning to communicate with animals is a 4-part on-demand workshop. In the workshop, you'll learn the essential techniques that are necessary to communicate with animals, including what is animal communication, breathing correctly to achieve the perfect state to communicate with your animals at a deeper level, using guided meditation exercises and method to communicate with animals, and how to send and receive information from your animals. So if you're wanting to learn how to communicate and connect with your animals at a deeper level, visit PetLifeRadio.com/workshop and purchase and download Learning to Communicate with Animals. You'll be glad you did.
Let's talk pets.
Let's talk pets
On Pet Life Radio.
Pet Life Radio.
PetLifeRadio.com.
Welcome back. Welcome back to Animal Rights on Pet Life Radio, and continue our conversation with the #1 New York Times bestselling author, James Rollins, and the latest book, The Seventh Plague. Now, James, when put together this book, were there certain goals that you had, things you wanted to accomplish, or things that you hoped that the reader would walk away with after reading it?
Oh, definitely. I think books work best that if once a reader turns that last page and closes the cover of the book, that hopefully, I've left you with something to think about. I don't want to go in great detail what I want to leave, that's going to ruin too many plot points. But basically, at the end of all my books, I have a what's true and what's not section that concludes the book. So that, whatever, because a lot of times people are surprised how much truth is buried in this fiction. And so at the end of the book, I strip away that fiction so you can see actually how much is true, which oftentimes is quite surprising. But also at least the breadcrumbs. So if there's any topics, whether it's about climate change, whether it's about the historical characters I raise in the book, whether it's about the electrical bacteria or about the truth behind the book of Exodus, I'm going to give you some breadcrumbs to follow so that if you have any interest in those subject matters, you can continue that investigation on your own.
There you go. So then when we talk about putting together the book and giving some insight, educating people, allowing them to do the research afterwards, let's talk about your research. When you find a particular topic that you want to enter, or multiple topics in this case, that you want to intertwine into the book, what type of research do you go through? Is it a lot of online research? Do you go to certain sources? And how much of that research is it a bulk of your time that you're doing that research compared to actually putting together the book?
Well, first I was in 1998, and so there really wasn't the online resource, but I always don't trust online sources necessarily because there's a lot of misinformation online, and so that can be a danger. I have a tendency to call people and talk to them. I like to get it from the horse's mouth. I found 9 times over the years that's where I get the most valuable, not only the information I need for a certain detail of a story, but oftentimes I'll find an entirely different story from that person. I was looking for writing an entirely different story set in Egypt. And so I was kind enough to have an Egyptologist respond to one of my emails, a gentleman named David Roll, who basically has a sort of alternate timeline for Egyptian history that if you view the Old Testament through this different timeline, you can find sort of support or proof that the events in the books of Exodus probably did happen. There's a historical basis for it. It wasn't just all myth and legend. And likewise, there's probably a scientific and rational explanation for the 7 plagues. So once I started hearing this from him, because that's not what I was pursuing, I was jotting down notes as fast as I could, and that became the basis of the story. So oftentimes my research thinks it's going one direction, and because I'm getting something direct from the source versus just from Wikipedia, I'll find an entirely new, exciting way to tell the story.
Very fascinating. So when you're gathering that, walk me through that overall process, just roughly here in an overview. You come up with the idea of the book. You've left a little teaser behind. You've got the Sigma Force team, but now you're collecting all this research that could change everything. Is there a process in your writing that you say, okay, I'm going to do the framework of this, the general gist of the story, then I'm going to get the rest of the research and move on from there and make alterations as I need to? Or how does that flow work? Because it seems like if you get all this great research and it's a new angle that you never thought of, it could really basically wad up your past work and throw it in the garbage because you've got some new material here.
And that's happened before. My very first Sigma book, Map of Bones, I had pitched an entirely different plot to my editor, and they were happy enough with the storyline. I wrote a detailed 24-page single-space outline of the entire story. But then once I started the research, I found an entirely new tack on the story, and I wrote an entirely different book, turned it into my editor, and she goes, well, this is nothing like the outline that you turned in. And I said, well, are you happy with it? Yeah, it's great. It's even better than Chubb. So I still enjoy that process, my typical, just the routine is usually I'm always collecting these ideas, tidbits of history, tidbits of science. I'm always trying to find ways of connecting various sort of what might sound disparate pieces and try to find ways to couple them. It's like almost like a jigsaw puzzle, trying to find these pieces that are going to fit together. And once I sort of see a vague outline, then I'll start doing research. And I'll spend about 90 days researching a novel, checking more about the history, more about science, more about locations. I'll build a sort of these little journals for each of those topics. And I allow myself only 90 days of research, though. On the 91st day, I have to start writing. Otherwise, if I just keep researching, I think I'm working, but by that point, I'm pretty much just playing. So I commit to myself to do 90 days of research to get the big bones of the story down, or at least researched at that point, then begin writing the novel. Not that even in the course of writing the novel, every other page requires me to either make a call, hop online, and try to get some further details. But the big bulk of the front loading of my research is that 90-day intensive research into the history, the science, and the locations.
Wow, very fascinating. So very structured, very, and I like how you do that. I mean, I really do, because like I was sort of alluding to there, you're gathering more and more research. At a point, you could be spending years researching something without actually getting everything put together. So 90 days is a nice threshold.
Yeah, I found that works for me, and different authors have different processes. But I found it works for me to do have that limitation so that I do actually start to write. But also, I found that I may appear like I know all about the Zika virus or all about some subject matter, because I think if you get enough telling details correct in the story, the reader will fill in the blanks. They will assume more authority than necessarily I even have on the subject matter. Just for example, my third book, Deep Fathom, I had written about a Navy SEAL. And I interviewed Navy SEALs. I went down to San Diego, went to where they trained Navy SEALs, wrote this book, was being interviewed on air. And the gentleman that was interviewing me, which is a rarity actually, had actually read my book and was asking me things directly from the book. And I'm answering them, and then he goes, "Oh, so tell me more about your career as a Navy SEAL." Like, what do you mean? So you're not a Navy SEAL? No, I'm not a Navy SEAL. I'm a veterinarian. But if you get enough of those telling details, people will believe almost anything. It's a strange process of fiction writing that if you just get a few details correct, the reader will fill in the blanks for you.
Wow, that's fascinating. Well, and hopefully TMZ doesn't get a hold of that and claim that you are a Navy SEAL, and then it's just a whole new ballgame at that point.
Exactly.
Well, now looking back on your career as an author and writer, compare how you do your structure today, how you do sit down and put everything together, compared to when this all first started. Is there a lot of difference? Do you find yourself more structured now, or have you always been very outlined and detail-oriented when it comes to writing?
I think actually I was probably more organized in the past. Back when I had my own veterinary hospital, which was a 24/7 type of job. And so when I first started writing, I hadn't had cracks in time in which to get a story done. And so I made a commitment to myself to write 3 double-spaced pages a day, so basically about a page and a half a day, and only 5 out of 7 days of the week. But I had to make sort of that structure around my professional life as a veterinarian. Now that I sort of reversed roles, now I write full-time, and writing is my paycheck, and veterinary medicine is my hobby, it's much easier to let that to waver a little bit, to procrastinate a little bit. I always thought, when I was working full time and writing, that if I ever shed the day job, I'd be much more productive than my 3 pages. And I am. I write 5 pages a day, 5 double-spaced pages, and that's my limit. That's what I found out. I didn't realize that until I just had the freedom to actually write more than 3 pages a day. That it takes about an hour to write a page, and so 5 pages, new pages for me is about 5 hours of new writing, and I hit a wall. That's pretty much where I know my batteries have run low, and it's time for me to go out and do a little bit of research, go run the dogs, go kayaking, recharge those batteries before I'm ready for the next set of 5 pages the next day.
Very, very cool. Very interesting. Because, I could assume that, with all this free time, you could just write, for hours on end. But you're right, you hit a wall after a while, both physically and mentally. I'm assuming you hit that wall. Exactly.
And so, that's what I found works best for me. So, but each author is different. I've other authors that, they can write around the clock, and they'll write an entire novel in a month. They'll do the whole thinking beforehand, whereas I'm more methodical. I'm, chugging away 5 pages a day, and, then my novel's done.
That's right. And more time to go kayaking and playing with the dogs and all the other wonderful stuff. So
yeah, the dogs are the limiting factor on much of my writing day, because that they get as impatient with me as I am at that point.
And for us, obviously, everybody who listens to this show are dog lovers, animal lovers in general. But I agree with you wholeheartedly, because I'm home based as well, whether I'm writing or doing my work as a communicator, et cetera, with animals. But I always laugh because my wife tells the story of a colleague of hers. She's a writer, but from a business standpoint, business analyst. And she talks about the story of a colleague of hers who works from home that has children. And so she's placed a clock outside of her office. And the kids have learned that until that clock hits 5:30, nobody's to enter mama's office, which I think was pretty cool. But do you think there will ever be a time when you could get the dogs to look at that clock and agree not to enter your office at 5:30, we'll say?
Not my dogs.
No, I don't think
the old adage about the preacher's daughter is usually the most well behaved. The veterinarian's dogs are usually the worst trained. My dogs rule. They rule the roost. They know it.
They know it. I think that's the way it is with every dog in some fashion or another. They'll find a way to definitely get your attention, and it's a good thing too, because you do need to get up and get out and about and stretch. You can't sit there at a computer.
Exactly. There's my equivalent of the furry version of a Fitbit. Just nudging me. Get out there and move. You've been sitting in that chair way too long.
That's right. They know those things. Great. All right, James. Well, hey, wonderful. Congratulations again on the book, The Seventh Plague, a Sigma Force novel. Everybody go out and pick up a copy of this. I know it's available at every brick and mortar store, online, your favorite independent stores. Everybody, there's no excuse not to get this. Where can people keep track of what you're doing, and where they can meet up with you and maybe shake your hand and get an autographed copy?
Well, the best place to get all my, where I'm at is my website, jamesrollins.com, or also I'm on Facebook. I'll be on tour for this next 8 days in various cities, in Phoenix today, I'll be in Houston tomorrow, then St. Louis, then Colorado, then San Diego, then Las Vegas. So you can find more details online, either on Facebook or jamesrollins.com.
Very good. So we'll make sure we have all that posted so everybody can get out to all your signings, get a chance to meet up with you, and get a copy of the book as well. And James, once again, congratulations on another great success with this book, The Seventh Plague. And we'll look forward to chatting with you again real soon when the next one comes about.
All right. Thanks, Tim. It's been a pleasure.
All right. My pleasure. All right, well, we're coming to the end of the show today. I want to thank everyone for listening to Animal Rights on Pet Life Radio. I want to send a special thank you out to producers and sponsors for making this show possible. If you have any questions, comments, or ideas, or people you want to hear on the show, please drop me an email. And you can email me at tim@petliferadio.com. It's tim@petliferadio.com. And I'll be glad to answer your questions, entertain your comments, and bring on the people you want to hear from most. So until next time, write a great story about the animals in your life. Write it in a blog, an article, or in a book. And who knows, you may be the next guest on Animal Rights on Pet Life Radio. Have a great day.
Let's Talk Pets, every week on demand, only on PetLifeRadio.com.